We're back here on the platform this evening, and we are talking about Black History Month. The month of February was Black History Month, and Vivian Whylly is our guest, and he has brought along a tremendous amount of documents from the Department of Archives, and we are tracing the history of the settlement of the people who settled Clifton, Gambier. We're going to go to Fox Hill, and then subsequently Bain and Grantstown in a short while. Vivian Whylly is our guest on the program today. And at the break, you were talking about Esther
Yes.
Whylly.
Esther Whylly was the mother, and this is 1851, of a son.
So she was born in the Bahamas.
Yes, she was born in the Bahamas.
And her parents were
African.
African. Okay. And she was born around the turn of the 18th century.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Yes. She actually was born around the year 1800, because the list that has her at the turn of the century, 1802, 1801, 1802. But here is a birth certificate from
I can't see it over
1851.
Okay.
And the ages of those people, like you said, you thought it was 13, I see it's 18. They were approximate because their births were never recorded. But we have Esther Whylly having a child named John in 1851. But this was the first year the children of black people were registered. Okay? And Gilbert is the name of the father. William Whylly, in his plantation journal, recognized that by keeping the African name of the slaves, he ran into trouble with the authorities. So he gave most of his slaves that had African names, English names, and wrote letters of marque, or, little paper, so if officers stop you and you were downtown and you were William Whylly's boy, you would have a paper saying, this is Gilbert Whylly,
yes,
otherwise known as Cudjoe, who is the property of William Whylly.
Right, so Cudjoe, who came here as an African, he adopted the name Whylly.
Gilbert
Whylly. And so there were a number of slaves who adopted the surnames of their masters.
For security reasons.
Yes, yes.
For security reasons.
And so you, Vivian Whylly, you are a direct descendant
of these Whylys.
Of these Whylys.
From the 1821 registry.
Yes.
Of the people who lived and were enslaved at Clifton.
Yes.
Now, we're in 1821. Gambia started as a result of the revolt on board the boat, the Creole. That was a slaver taking slaves from Virginia around to Louisiana. Okay, this is 1830. They needed water. They came into Bahamian waters and stopped at Abaco. When the slaves who knew English now heard that they were in Abaco, they knew from past experience in Heron that they were in an area where people on a slave ship, packing them like that was illegal. So they overthrew the crew and took over the ship, brought the ship back to Nassau. Now the Americans who were running the slaver appealed to the British, the governor at the time, saying to him, I think it was Lord Dunmore, please give us our slaves back, take over the ship, because we're American and we know that we have a right to carry slaves. But Lord Dunmore said, no, because now remember, Lord Dunmore was a loyalist from America, so he got big bones to pick with them. Tell him, no. You were trading in a British territory. Your boat was captured by a British warship, a man of war. Sorry, your boat was captured by your slaves. You were brought here. Now you want our ships to take over the ship from the slaves and make them slaves again and let y'all continue your journey in Louisiana. No. Anybody who wants to go with y'all could go, but all of them are free to stay in the Bahamas. That was when Gambia was settled, because the land at Gambia were given out to about 21 people who decided to stay. Now, mind you, some of the
So
slaves,
they weren't from Clifton at all?
the people from Gambia, no. They came from the ship named the Creole.
Yeah, so they came out of the United States.
Yeah, they came out of Virginia, but they were Ibu. A lot of they were rebellious slaves in Virginia. It was a bad stock, so they were shipping them around to be sold in Louisiana to work in the cotton and tobacco fields, which was a harder form of slavery.
Okay. Now, so we had now the establishment of Clifton, which
Tusculum.
originally belonged to the Lucayans,
Yes.
but later settled by slaves.
Lewis Johnson, Thomas Moss, James Wood were the three, and William Lyford and Peter Edwards, where the South Ocean beach golf course is. You see those ruins? That's the Edwards Plantation. William Whylly bought that. He bought properties subsequently of Moss, Wood, and Johnston. And then when William Whylly died, in order to pay her debts, Mrs. Lyford received money from Whylly through the bailiff for the settlement of the Lyford property. It's a small circle of names. I have the chronological history of the title of Clifton.
Okay.
And that's a story for another day.
So Lyford also owned the land that is now Lyford Key.
Yes, but Whylly got that from his wife because they died and needed money. He died and needed money, so they sold the property and William Whylly bought it.
Now there was a particular lady who remained in the middle of the golf course at Lyford Key.
Her name was Anne DeVoe.
Anne DeVoe.
Anne DeVoe and her descendants were ran off by the Miami-Nassau Development Company. Subsequently, that's what happened to a lot of the slaves. Mr. Jones, not to drift off black history, but most of the western part of Nassau was owned by black people.
Yes, sir. Of course.
You see, Adelaide is there. That's the second oldest settlement. Gambia is there. That's the first oldest free slave settlement. That's, I should say. Clifton, you know where they built Albany? That was the Promised Land plantation owned by the Moss brothers, who used to import slaves. That's why Clifton was so important, because right in those steps, you see, they landed the slaver from Gorée Island in Senegal, straight across the Atlantic to that point. They ain't stopped nowhere else but to Clifton. And this whole area is so historical. It's been put on the 2004 endangered sites for UNESCO. But it is being looked at now, again, by the Ministry of Tourism. But Clifton is a holy place.
But UNESCO has not declared it to be one of its sites around the world.
A World Heritage Site.
A World Heritage
Not
Site.
yet, because this is another step that we have to go to. See, sometimes the Bahamian government and the Bahamian people, especially those who think they know me, need to hear my message. My message isn't I own the plantation. My message to our people is this place is historical, it's holy, let's preserve it, and let's keep it for our children.
And let it be a World Heritage Site.
Thank you.
Yeah.
everybody's, oh, Whylly just looking for money. Whylly give up money to make that a park. Whylly stopped fighting to make that a park. I could have gone, and Clifton Key developers offered me $1 million of property and working there for the rest of my life. But had I taken that, that would have been 30 pieces of silver. Because today, all of the Bahamian children can go there. All of the tourists can go there. And the day will come when they recognize that it's not about Vivian Whylly. It's about the history of the Lucayan, of the Loyalists, of the African, of the free people who are now running this country.
Tusculum, how did it come about? And there's an area in New Providence, many people don't know, it is called Tusculum. It is quite developed now with many modern homes. And I guess if you're interested...
Under the Quiet and Titles Act,
yes,
people own land in the Bahamas. If you don't watch the newspaper, next thing you know, the court grant land, and it's your land when you find out, like, years later, like, probably like the Whylys. Okay,
but Tusculum was settled by slaves from Clifton.
William Whylly was granted Tusculum from King George. King George III, that was the grant on Tusculum. And I think I might have that grant right here. But Tusculum was a sisal plantation. Sisal was used to make ropes. Ropes was the engine for the sails to go up and down. And the sails were the engine for the boat. So cotton grew here well, sisal grew here well. And these are the things that kept the ships going from the trade. It was triangular trade route.
Good. Continuing with Black history, Whylly, the areas of New Providence known as Bain and Grantstown, they were, I'm told, settled by people who came from these areas, from Clifton, from Gambia, such, so that they can be near to town and near to places where they work.
Well, mostly. Baines and Grantstown were settled by people who knew that the first law, when Gregory's Arch, when it had the gate, if you were found in the city of Nassau after sunset, you were put in the jail, which is now the public library. Okay? So, if you were out there at Clifton and you came into town to sell your ware, even though you had Mr. Whylly gave you a paper to be in town, if you were in town, you were locked up because it was after dark and no Negroes. So then, that is when they started building little houses so that when the sun was going down, that's where they would walk over the hill. And that's where the term over the hill came from. Government Hill. And you got over on the other side, once it was going down, well, you know where the governor's wall is there. Then you would be free from being locked up because the gate could close and no blacks would be in the town. And Bain and Grantstown started to expand. Another thing was the development of the Anabaptist movement in 1790, I think it was. Bethel Baptist Church, the original church, was brought together. And it was a body of people meeting, and then about in the early 1800s, they built a building. And I think the first building was built around 1812, 1815. I'm doing a little bit more research on that right now. And Bethel Baptist Church was a place of refuge and a big part of what is Baines and Grantstown.
Yeah. Talking about churches, St. Peter's Baptist Church at Gambia was one of the first Baptist churches in the country. Well, certainly the first Baptist church in the West.
Yes, St. Peter's Native
Baptist
Church.
Yes.
And the word native meant it was black.
Yes.
And it was established in 1857, which is only 26 years. The church...
And it came out of the St. John's particular church of Native Baptists.
Yes. From in town.
Yes.
And so, remember now, Gambia also was a very productive place. Gambia had Sisal, but Gambia was a place where a lot of people were fishermen. A lot of people were farmers. And all of them were free.
Yes. Another point that we ought to talk about is that when these Africans came to the Bahamas, when they came here as slaves, they were Muslims. They were Muslims, Whylly.
It is very interesting that you brought that up, because there was a Muslim prince who was caught in one of the wars in Africa. Remember now, over the years, the tribal groupings started to war on each other because they could make trade with the guys in the white sails. And so a lot of these peoples were Muslim. Christianity came as a result of them being westernized.
Yes, they were Western, and they adopted the religion of their slave masters.
Exactly.
And so as a result, you have many of the Muslims who became Anglicans.
Yes. I want to bring something to your attention. If you go through Adelaide Village, there is a particular house, a few of them, which are built like the houses in the Middle East, like Muslim houses. Go through, you will see. There is a documentary, well, basically the evidence is in the archives that what you just said is correct. A lot of them came from Islam.
Yes.
You see, a lot. When people want trade,
They were Christianized.
They were Christianized. And, you know, I don't want to make this seem to be a religious conversation, but what you're saying is true.
Okay. No, we were talking about the settlements that we had.
The Africans who came.
And the Africans, and we were talking about the churches. You mentioned the Anabaptists. And now, we know that the Baptist movement was started by Prince William. All right.
In the Bahamas, he was a follower of one of the Lyle, the gentleman, Miss Reverend Lyle from the United States.
But he was a freed slave.
Right. And then him and Prince William, he was the one, when he went back to Jamaica, I think Prince William came and went to Jamaica, met him, got, they didn't ordain them, but they got sanctified, and they became the leaders of that church, and they came in the Bahamas evangelizing.
And started preaching in the bushes.
Yeah.
And as then started a congregation on Meeting Street.
Right, and that was Bethel Baptist Church.
It was Bethel Chapel.
Well, Bethel Chapel.
He couldn't call it a church. It was illegal for him to call it a church.
Okay, you understand what I mean. What is today Bethel Baptist Church?
Yes.
That is where that started.
Now, there is a piece of history that I am given to understand that the first Baptist church was really in Eleuthera. I don't know whether it was started by the Eleutherans adventurers, because, you know, the Baptist movement in the Bahamas is, well, the Baptist movement in the world is about 400 years old. And so I'm given to understand that the very first Baptist church in the Bahamas was in Eleuthera, but the first Baptist church in New Providence.
Did they show you any evidence of it?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
So then, if they showed you the evidence, then
yes.
I stand on your understanding and say that it's probably true, but having not seen the evidence,
yes.
I cannot say that it is. but I know you being the person that you are.
Because
they brought you the
The
documents.
Baptist movement did not come to the Bahamas by black men. Prince William started the first chapel on Meeting Street.
Okay.
The first Baptist church was actually
That's Native
in
Baptist.
Eleuthera. Absolutely.
Yeah, there's a difference. I know what you're saying.
Okay.
Because these were Protestant Baptists.
Protestant
when
Baptists
they
in
were
Eleuthera.
white people.
Right.
Because we remember that these people who went to Abaco, then they broke up in Abaco and went to Eleuthera.
Exactly.
Because they were practicing hand clapping, praying, laying on of hands. The Baptist movement.
Exactly.
That's what made it Baptist, because they would clap their hands, hallelujah, and they would baptize and lay their hands on for prayer.
We're talking Black History in Black History Month with Vivian Whylly. We'll come right back.